this is Marlene and a warm welcome from Glasgow, Scotland to all around the world. In this series of Marlene and Friends, I'll be sharing with you the most amazing group of people who have all the skills and expertise to make our world one of health and peace for all who live here, humans and non-humans alike. My guest this week is the incredibly gifted William Spear, a pioneer and an early proponent of the macrobiotic way of life. As a lifelong teacher whose clarity, humour and insight inspires thousands of families who face serious illness, draws from more than 4 decades as an educator after in-depth training with Michio Kushi, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Centre and Sogyal Rinpoche. Through his foundation, Fortunate Blessings, William works regularly with hospice volunteers and healthcare professionals who seek holistic strategies to overcome trauma. For example, in 2004, the tsunami disaster in Southeast Asia, William created Second Response and led a team of mental health professionals to assist orphaned and traumatised children in Sri Lanka. In 2006 in Java, again in 2009 in Samoa. In 2011, William travelled to Japan. After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, he and his team arrived there and implemented training programs designed to prevent PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The work of the Fortunate Blessings Foundation is quite frankly incredible. Please go to the website and check this out. As if that wasn't enough, William Spear is also the best-selling author of the revised edition of Feng Shui Made Easy, the most notable Feng Shui book in the West. Fantastic. Hi, I'm Marlene Watson-Tara in service for a healthy world. My guest today is the wonderful and inspirational William Spear, a teacher, author, mentor, facilitator and counsellor whose foundation, Fortunate Blessings, has changed the lives of literally thousands of people around the world. William's expertise is in so many areas, but includes the macrobiotic way of life, intuitive feng shui, mentoring programs, end-of-life care, such incredible gifted work. Mr. Spear, a big warm welcome. I know you're always full on with your foundation, so I really appreciate you sparing me some time today.
Thanks, Marlene. Great to see you again.
Fantastic. Well, I've got so many questions for you, and I don't know if we're going to get through them all, but I want to just go for it now. First of all, as president and founder of Fortunate Blessings, can you please share with the world the wonderfully inspiring and innovative work of your foundation?
Sure, thanks. We've recently shifted, as many people have, to look at a wider range of subjects within Fortunate Blessings. One of the initiatives has taken up most of our time in the last decade, as you know, and that's the initiative called Second Response. It was initially disaster response work, which in itself has shifted to more preemptive training. But the bigger picture of Fortunate Blessings has always been focused on society and social change. And the areas we think are the most important, like you and your husband and others in the bigger community of natural health, looks at macrobiotics, looks at the way that we can make choices and changes in our life that impact our destiny, that impact society, but also directly impacts our health and the health of our family and communities. So that is an aspect of Fortunate Blessings that looks at those questions from a purely way of life, kind of lifestyle point of view, and specifically around food and all the aspects of food, from agriculture and growing to processing and preparing, and even in personal digestion of food, for example. The second aspect of Fortunate Blessings is one that looks at what we call vital design, the ecology, the environment, environments that are safe, that are sustainable, that are healthy, materials that are used appropriately in different areas of the world, design ratios and the use of light, the use of different types of energy systems. The third aspect of Fortunate Blessings is end-of-life care, and that we call the gentle passage. Nobody yet has gotten off the planet alive. We're all going to come to that point where we have to face our own mortality. And I had the good fortune of having a number of years of study with some profoundly gifted teachers in that field. And as a part of macrobiotics, as you well know, and others who are working in diet and health, many people who come to look at changing their lifestyle and their diet come with significant problems facing the potential of end of life. and many of them actually don't make it, of course. And I was ill-equipped to really face how to help people die peacefully. I think I had a pretty good sense of learning how to help people live peacefully and pass that on. But when it came time to letting go, I didn't really know what I was doing, and most people really don't. We're kind of operating by the Braille method. So I studied it, and I began to offer workshops for hospice and continue to work in that field of end-of-life care to this day, either as a personal counselor to people or in training of hospice workers or those who work in bereavement or people facing end-of-life. And the fourth aspect is really the specific work of second response, which, as I said, has taken up an inordinate amount of time, so that most of what Fortunate Blessings was doing, diet and health, vital design, and end-of-life care, has been put off to the side for a while, but we're returning to that now with a new website and an initiative that will come in each of those other three areas other than second response.
It's unbelievable, Bill. I mean, seriously, you're just such an incredible human being. What a source of inspiration you are to the world. And I want to get into each of these areas, you know, and touch on them individually because they're all so important and so special. I know last year you sent 2 trauma relief teams to Nepal. Was it last year, the year before, following the earthquakes? And then you sent some people from your trauma teams to Croatia to help work with NGO relief workers that are helping Syrian refugees. I mean, you know, your work is quite frankly heartwarming. It's just, you know, I just adore and love you. So can you talk a little bit about that and what your staff do there?
Sure. Recently, as you said, in Nepal, after the earthquakes that were there, we forget that there were 2 quite close back-to-back, only a couple of weeks that separated them, and they were on both sides of Kathmandu, the central city of Nepal. It devastated an enormous number of people's lives, and because they're subsistence living, they're hillside living, and it was preceding the torrential downpours, the monsoon season. The earthquakes were just kind of the start of a series of very difficult circumstances for many people in these communities, particularly children. Similarly, the Croatian refugee camp on the border of Hungary, where many people escaping the civil war in Syria were, as we all know, moving through Greece and Macedonia and up across Eastern Europe, finally to get to sites perhaps in Germany or France, all the way to the English Channel. These communities were escaping horror and traumas, unimaginable traumas. Most adults have a pretty good sense of how to kind of develop a resilience, whether in an earthquake, in a typhoon, in a hurricane, or even amidst man-made disasters like civil acts of war or violence. Whereas children do not. Children do not have the capacity to understand what's happening, and they need to feel safe. And if they're not nurtured and supported in a certain way, they can develop certain what are called psychopathologies or deeply disordered phenomena that comes into their bodies. Unfortunately, the medical community usually treats these as psychological problems, but as I like to say, the issues are really in the tissues. They're not in the mind. They're not something you can sit down and have conversations with children about when they have fear or they have anger or they have deep, long-set grief. The outcome, statistically, of children who have been impacted by traumas and disasters is that 1 out of 10 of them will probably develop a pathology known as post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that means is that they will eventually develop psychosomatic illnesses, asthma, skin problems, digestive problems, various kind of learning disabilities. It's a tremendous burden, not only on them, but on the families, on the communities in which they live, and on the healthcare systems of their countries, wherever they're going to go. So here in America, if there's a tornado, say in a city or state like Oklahoma or out in the Midwest, and there's the 200 or 300 houses that are hit, we can figure that there might be, let's say 50, 60 children out of the 500 or 600 who have been impacted who would develop PTSD. So that number is not a terribly significant number. It can be handled by a community. But when it hits a country like Nepal, or when it hits millions of people who are refugees, and we go back in time through Japan through Samoa, through Haiti, through Indonesia and Java. And when we began this work in 2004, notably after the tsunami killed in 2004 235,000 people. And it's just, you can't wrap your head around a statistic like that. And that speaks about those who perish, not about those who are impacted.
Yeah.
The 2-3 million children who are impacted by this tsunami. Mm-hmm. So when you do the statistics of 1 out of 10 in a situation like that, you're not talking about 50 or 60 kids. You're talking about an enormous number of children who have been compromised by trauma that's in their bodies. So we have a particular methodology that involves play, because children want to feel alive and want to feel joy. But when a serious incident comes up like a tornado or a cyclone or a tsunami, earthquake, everybody gets very serious, as they should be, to return a community to a kind of basis of safety, food, water, shelter. The big guys come in, the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, Mercy Corps, Save the Children. These people do enormously important work, but they don't do the kind of psychological work that helps mitigate or reduce the incidences of PTSD. And what we did in Sri Lanka in 2004, where we went back 11 times, what we did in Samoa and Java, Japan, where we sent a number of teams over a 6-month period through other disasters close to home and very far away, up until the most recent ones in Nepal, where we sent 6 teams 2 different times over 2 months in different areas of Nepal, was not only to work with children closely, but to work with caregivers, with teachers and parents and people in community centers to incorporate the kinds of methodologies, somatic-based therapies, that remind people that body and mind are connected, and that emotions, after a while, start to live in the body. They're not just psychologically available.
Sure.
And the methodologies are very simply this, that we, from the children's point of view, provide games for about an hour and a half. And they love them. They just have so much fun. But what in fact is happening is that we've carefully crafted and put together a series of exercises for them to harmlessly release fear, anger, grief from their bodies, from their tissues. These are methods that we've used traditional Chinese medicine to develop. We've used Qigong to develop. We've used a lot of somatic therapies that are inherent in bioenergetics and different kinds of cultural applications. And so from the kids' point of view, they don't know what's being delivered to them. They're just having a lot of fun. But it's not ring around the rosy. And there's no language involved, so we can do it anywhere in the world. And recently we've just shifted to bring it back to the United States to do a little bit more preemptive training, particularly with caring for the caregivers who are working with children who have been harmed, or who are caregivers working on the front line in domestic abuse centers, in drug and alcohol rehabilitation counselors, in lots of different trauma centers and crisis centers, where every day people are dealing with an inordinate amount of trauma just in the society because of the changing world we live in.
Unbelievable, it's incredible. Well, I have to tell the world, Mr. Spear, that I've been in your workshop. I was one of these children doing the play shop methodologies. I think it was 2007 or 8 in Portugal, in Lisbon. And you held this class and it was just breathtaking. All us big adults were there. We were doing all these exercises and it was just phenomenal, incredible. You're just a very special soul. The next thing I want to move on to is your mentoring programs. I know, we all know the only permanent in life is the impermanence, and that's one of the things why I love traditional Chinese medicine and have been in love with it since I was a young girl, because the whole yin and yang, everything's moving all the time. And I actually have a great t-shirt, Mr. Spear, that says on it that actual saying, the only permanence in life is the impermanence. And if I'm having a bit of a rough ride in life, I pop that t-shirt on and I just sit there with it all day because I know it's going to change,
Exactly.
But,
That's great.
Everyday problems are really challenges, and I know you're a great mentor of CEOs worldwide, and you've mentored global leaders and cutting-edge designers and entrepreneurs, architects, authors, college professors, lawyers. I don't think there's anybody that you haven't touched. So, what areas of focus in a mentoring program would you include, and are they designed specifically for each individual?
To answer your last part of your question first, that's exactly how I developed a mentoring program.
Right.
It's by an invitation, and people can go on my website and learn a little bit more about kind of the overall view of what's up. But what I do initially is send out a very long list of the kinds of topics that we might address. I've mentored a few physicians, I've mentored a few architects, I've mentored a number of people from business and corporate, global corporation kind of presence. And the essential part is that what's really happening to people happens inside their own consciousness, inside their own psyche, and how they see the world, the perspective they bring is the only thing they can really change. They change themselves. So with a lot of hats on my hat tree, a lot of different kind of reference points that I have in my own background and history, be it feng shui or vital design, an understanding of environmental issues or ecology or sustainable materials, which would be something an architect might want to look at more closely, or end-of-life care for a hospice worker, or integrative medicine, or questions of macrobiotics, diet and health, diet and cancer. You know very well that we've really looked at food so carefully that we understand the impact of certain foods on all kinds of conditions. We can make relationships that have yet to be really borne out by serious evidence-based study, but we know that they're going to come. We knew that 35, 40 years ago when we were talking about the importance of soy products, of miso, or the importance of leafy green vegetables, but there was no kale lobby in the United States, so the dairy industry kind of beat down that conversation around calcium. So I might offer to a physician or a health counselor or a nutritionist a kind of conversation in that mentoring program around those issues. As you know, I also am engaged in a way of seeing, which is a typology study, the 9-star key, or the aspects of looking at typology through the Myers-Briggs window. And those are areas that I've studied a lot. And so someone who is interested in the mentor program might kind of grade, I want to talk a lot about end-of-life care, but I don't particularly need to have mentoring around feng shui or 9-star key study. Or someone else might say, I'm an architect and I don't really know that much about the relationship between diet and disease because I have clients and I want to build better houses, or I want to get a sense of vital design and study with you in that regard. And still someone else might be starting up a business and look at the relationships or the partnerships or how to develop a company from go jumps, as we say. And that's also something I've had some experience with. So they are self-designed, and it engages an individual with a phone call of a couple hours once a week, Skype session if necessary, and within a certain period of time, also some face-to-face visits and consultations and learning in both directions, just to really explore together, maybe as an elder to most of the people who would engage in the program, a little bit of advice, not the least of which is that I've raised 3 grown sons who are independently very, very interesting kids with a great mind and understanding of the world in which they live, not without their challenges, of course, but many times it's young parents who, like, what do I do with my kids? How did you get through that bump in the road when they were 6 or 8, or adolescents or teenagers? Mm-hmm. So just simply as an elder, it might be a mentoring program that develops around that. And what's interesting is that inevitably these things cross over. Right?
Of course, yes.
Because everybody still has to face the diet and disease question. Yeah. Everybody still has to look at their end-of-life issues with their elderly parents, the architect, the doctor, the businessman. Suddenly dad has got prostate cancer and he's been given a bad prognosis. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be of support and service to people who are a bit younger perhaps, or kind of new on the block, at some self-awareness and asking these kind of questions.
Well, that's right, and I would agree 100%. William, I think it's the wisdom of life. Really, that's when you've experienced life yourself, and you have years and years and years of wisdom. You can't buy that from somebody, So I think I actually have to book a mentoring session with you and send you my business plan, because I'm doing something that's not right.
I think you're doing okay.
Well,
you're way out there.
You are. I can't believe you were one of your mentors was one of my heroes, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I remember reading her book back when my sister was dying 17, 18 years ago. And, you know, I know you studied with her in the late 70s, I think. The classic On Death and Dying is a book that I've passed to many people, you know, but you also studied with incredible, unbelievable mentors in the world, William, in palliative and hospice care for cancer patients and their families. You've worked with death row inmates, I mean, victims of disasters, helping these people to come to terms with the end of life. You know, so with almost 4 decades of experience, you know, as a counsellor and a macrobiotic teacher, amongst everything else that you've done, I know you bring a hugely profound lifelong dedication to health and healing, and that results in, you know, you've got such a special gift. How you can actually help the dying, you know, complete their lives and resolve their feelings and birth peacefully to their final breath. How do you do it? I mean, how do you do that?
You know, I had the opportunity to meet Dame Cecily Saunders, who founded the hospice movement in London many, many years ago, or I believe it was Ireland, actually, where she founded it.
Yes.
And she told a story to a group of people that gathered together to kind of explore this very question. The truth of the matter is, for those who have done any kind of end-of-life work with individuals, it's a sort of no-exit kind of counseling. You can't get enough of it once you start it, because nothing beyond this experience of a person leaving their body and passing on brings a sense of presence in a more profound way, in a more enriching and deeply transformative way than being with somebody in end of life. That moment when someone passes, and the moments that lead up to it and that follow it, are so extraordinarily powerful. So although Dame Saunders said, you know, although people come to us all the time and say, well, how do you do it? How it must be very depressing, or it must be very difficult, or how can you handle it? And when you go there and do that so often, as I tell people in workshops around training hospice workers, I know of no better way to develop oneself than to learn to be present at the end of life. I just have never found a better way. It's just an extraordinary experience that you come to realize is not a skill set building, but rather a Braille method discovery. You only operate in the blind, and you find out over and over and over again what doesn't work, until you get to the point of realizing that end-of-life care is not doing anything. It's a matter of being. It's a matter of showing up and being unconditionally present. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was extraordinary at that. Sogyal Rinpoche was extraordinary at that. Dame Saunders was extraordinary at that. And surprisingly, many, many people, the streets are full of sages, many people who come to the aid of their aging parents or neighbors or children are very, very good at it. They really know how to be far better than they know how to do anything. But society has asked them to do something when just being is enough at end of life. So it's kind of a ironic, counterintuitive oxymoron. You don't do anything. You just show up, and you learn so much from it and grow so much from it.
It's so interesting you said that, William. You know, when my sister was dying, or when my dad was dying, and I sat with both of them, and just what you've said, there's actually, I was just there, you know, and towards the last moments, it was like a peacefulness almost. Of course, when it's your, you know, your sort of close family, it's, you know, I'm not saying it's any less painful when you're counselling someone, but obviously when it's your daddy or your sister, the emotion is like, wow. But yeah, I have to say I felt very peaceful as well, and the moments following that as well, it was quite incredible. I don't know what I felt in the room, but I was glad I was there for both of them. So
yeah, that's wonderful. It's a very rare privilege, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just an extraordinary
It's
experience.
a very special time. I know that sounds like maybe not the right thing to say, but it was very special for me, you know, to feel that. And I don't have any fear of death. I mean, Bill says I don't have any fear of life either, but, you know, because I write to the world every day, he'll say, Marlene, you don't know what the word fear means, you know.
The two are very close. Those who fear death often fear life.
Yeah.
And correspondingly, if you don't have a fear of death, you certainly don't have fears of life. So, Totally understand that. It's great.
Well, your intuitive Feng Shui approach is just incredible. Okay, so I remember reading your book, I can't remember how many decades ago. It's just a phenomenal Feng Shui made easy. It goes beyond and explains more in depth that, you know, than the art of placement. You know, sometimes people think, oh yeah, it's about putting your bed here, or I need to turn my desk towards the window. But the way you elaborate and expand in your book, I would encourage everybody seriously to get this book and read it. It is just so simple. So could you talk a little bit about that, William? Thanks.
Sure. You know, I came to studying Feng Shui as an extension of one's relationship to their environment outside of food and diet. Of course, studying macrobiotics and working in the community, we were looking at what's on our table and how that affected our body and mind. But we were also living in houses, we were sleeping in rooms, we were working in environments that perhaps weren't always the healthiest or weren't aligned to support our dreams as much as we were trying to change our bloodstreams. So I looked at it from an environmental health point of view. And I studied as much as I could find out there. When my book was written, there were only 5 or 6 books on the subject. So I started to teach it, and actually in the United Kingdom, including in Glasgow, I gave very large seminars. There were a couple hundred people who came to seminars in Glasgow, I remember. And in London, there were hundreds of people. And eventually someone came up and asked me to write a book. I kind of tried to tuck tail and run because those who teach don't know anyway. Those who write books are committing to the paper, and then now I have to go back and look at, oh my God, did I write that? Anyway, I didn't want to stay in that author world, but I wrote the book. It sold out. It's in its 22nd printing. It's in 16 languages. It became quite successful. But the distinction I brought to it, which is what you're asking, is that I realized as comfortable as I was working as a consultant in Feng Shui, I felt like I could turn the dials and kind of twist the knobs and make stuff happen pretty easily. I could certainly help people get a better income. I could help people improve their relationships. I could, fix up a little bit of their issues. But I found out that unless people change from the inside out, it doesn't last. They come back a year later and say, well, I need another job, or that relationship fell apart, even though it was new, or I spent all that money and I couldn't generate more. And that wasn't a function of the outer environment. It was a function of the inner landscape. Mm-hmm. So the distinction that I brought to Feng Shui was one as if nothing's going on out there at all. That the whole bagua, the whole map, the whole grid of what normally is used in Feng Shui, laid outside on a floor plan or in a plot plan or in a room, house, is really a map of consciousness. And that architecture of consciousness, the way in which we see the world, is something we can change and rearrange. We rearrange our priorities every day. We rearrange our kind of sense of what life is about decade by decade. We're very different as children than we were as parents. We're very different when our parents pass away than we were before our parents pass away. We go through changes. We go through phases. And as those phases and changes take place, as all the ancients have written and all great classics refer, we change our perspectives of life. And that means Feng Shui can be a living art. It's different. My house is different than it was when I had 6-year-olds running around in it, as of course it should be. And similarly, my mindset is different. My perspectives are different. Sure. So rather than be a function of or victim to the outer world, which I can't necessarily control, but I can certainly try to make some noise about the changes that are taking place there in the climate, in the environment, in politics, etc. I can certainly change my perspectives. So that's what Feng Shui, intuitive Feng Shui, really is, to develop a sensitivity about what's really important for you internally.
Yeah, we always encourage our students that come and study with Bill and I. It's on our recommended reading list because, as you say, it's an extension of Macrobiotics. It all fits in together and they always enjoy and love it, And talking about Macrobiotics, you are an internationally recognised counsellor with personal experience and knowledge for, I think, nearly 5 decades. It's just incredible. And I know you've counselled people all over the world. Is there any one message from that sticks in your mind, William, that you could share with us all here?
I think the longer I think of myself as someone practicing macrobiotics, it's not really different than just practicing life. And we can practice life kind of from a yin way or a yang way. What that means is we can kind of be a little bit more open and flexible, or a little bit more defined and specific. We need both of those qualities, but it's never 50-50. One is going to be slightly more than the other. We're still going to have to obey the law when we get in the car and drive on the right side of the road. So you can't get too wishy-washy about going down the highway. But we might approach it a little more slowly and relaxed when we're in traffic than be all stressed out, sort of yin and yang of it. So for me, macrobiotics is a lot more like poetry than it is science or philosophy. There's a flexibility to it because I can make not a lifetime choice to be macrobiotic, but a daily choice in almost everything I do, which adds up to an impact not just of a day or of a week or of a month, but over the years of being conscious about what changes I'm going through, how my day-to-day choices have impacted those changes, and what the outcome is that I either desire or perhaps what's occurring that I don't desire. And I'll never forget once in a consultation observed with another teacher that he basically said, congratulations, you're so sick, you've made all these wonderful choices, and now to overcome them, all you have to do is do the opposite. Right? And when first the congratulations were there, it's like, well, wait a minute, why would you congratulate someone for being sick? But that's not too different from how I see macrobiotics as being a possible flexible choice of how to change your life and the choices and changes we go through. So I don't have this hard-edged, strict. For me, strict always meant rigid, and rigid is always going to be unhappy. I love some of the conversations, as you know well, that have emerged on Facebook that try to drive it into this corner of being right or wrong or good or bad. Right? And our teachers never were in this kind of dualistic way saying this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. But our Western mindset kind of took it like that from a sort of religious perspective, when originally I think people did whatever they wanted with the teaching and were much more flexible and made choices on a much more almost poetic and artful basis.
Yeah.
So I've embraced macrobiotics in that context. And while that doesn't necessarily fit someone who's facing a life-threatening illness, they have to be able to do it as an adventure too,
sure.
Not just a mission. And when it's something they choose, they may have to be a little bit more focused and specific about their approach in the beginning to overcome their sickness and learn how to maintain their health. But eventually, macrobiotics is a brilliant method to help us realize our dreams, to really make a contribution and kind of get over ourselves and make a difference in the world.
Yeah, I love that. Get over yourself. I love it. That's perfect.
Right.
Beautifully explained. Okay, Mr. Spear, before we leave, I could talk to you forever. I love your wisdom. You could share stories for hours on here, but have you got a funny story to make all my viewers around the world laugh?
I was thinking about it when you asked me earlier to reflect on what might be. Since we ended on the macrobiotic question, I think one thing that comes to mind is early on when I first moved to Connecticut in the 70s with my wife, now of 40 years. And we started offering cooking classes in a very typical kind of East-West Center sort of environment. Mm-hmm. We had a small facility where your husband has been and would come from time to time, as other macrobiotic teachers did. And we once had a class, it was Friday night cooking class, and Joan, my wife, was teaching, and most people would come on time, but a woman came in kind of late, so we didn't have much time to talk to her, sign her up, or go through any formalities. And she sort of, we said, come on in. And she sat down in a seat, kind of on the second row, while Joni was cutting some vegetables and talking about, yin and yang of a carrot or something like that. And she kind of was looking around and was quite uncomfortable. But Joan prepared the dish, and I think she was making a nishime dish, and she layered the vegetables on the bottom, and then she took the pot and she put it in the oven. And then before she went on to the next recipe and the next kind of part of what she was doing, she said, are there any questions? And, you know, somebody asked a question about oil or salt, and then this woman kind of put up her hand, you know, just like asked, and John said, yes, what's the question? And she said, when do you use the microwave? And John went, we don't have a microwave. And she said, I thought this was microwave cooking.
That's the best one. I haven't heard that one before. Very good.
She just missed one letter in the definition.
Oh dear, I love it. I love it.
Got
Microwave
up
cooking.
and she excused herself and backed out the door.
I have to use that in my next class. That's fantastic. Well, you know, William, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom, your life's work. It's just incredible. You know, you've just touched so many people's hearts and souls, and I know the viewers around the world, they're in Australia, China, Japan, the UK, everywhere, America, Germany, France, everywhere, and people are emailing and saying they're loving the Marlene and Friends series, and you're going to be such an incredible treat for them. So a million thank you for your time, and I can't remember the last time we were together. It was either Lisbon or New York, but it was a long time ago, so we have to get together soon.
I look forward to that. Marlene, thanks for your work too. It's so great to be with you, and your contribution is enormous to all of our health and service, and just to look at our own selves very deeply. Your compliments are deeply touching to me, so I hope you can continue in good health, and the work you do is really wonderful. Really
Thank
great.
you so much, William, and it's a wonderful opportunity for me to tell the world just incredible, you know, the work that you do is just phenomenal. So have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Marlene. Thank you.